Good morning, everybody. It is Science Saturday. I am, as always, super excited because Science Saturday is so much fun. Now, our surroundings, familiar, right? Because we have, once again, taken over the University of the Virgin Islands dock because there's so much amazing stuff down here, and we want to show you all about it. So, we are, as the title says, looking for seagrass by the seashore. And we are going to be looking at the shape, what it does for us, all the really fun scientific stuff. And you know who's going to tell us about it? Our favorite scientist, Joe, because he's the one with all the scientific knowledge that keeps us going. So, we are, like I said, down in Brewers at the University Dock, and we are going to be diving underwater to look at the seagrass. So on the screen right now that I can't see, but I am told that we are seeing a live view from the GoPro right next to the dock. So that seagrass is literally right off of the University Dock, and in just a few minutes, our favorite Science Saturday intern, Smush, is going to be taking that GoPro and taking us on a tour of the seagrass around here. So, we wanna get started. We wanna take a look at the seagrass. We wanna see what's going on. So I am going to hop on down to where I can see the screen, and Joe is gonna join me, and we are gonna learn all about seagrass. So let's go this way. All right, and here's my first view of what we're seeing.
So let's see the setup you got there.
Ooh. So here we are. This is a fun one because you guys are actually going to watch us at Command Central because we've got all the amazing tech work that Joe has set up, and I know that I talk about it a lot and how there's no way that I could do this without him. It's because of this whole wild setup. So I'm going to take a quick second to say thank you to Community Foundation of the Virgin Islands, who is, as always, a huge supporter of Science Saturday, and they have helped us to get a lot of this equipment that we use that allows us to take you guys underwater as we are streaming live. The seagrass is so pretty. I'm looking at it here on one of our additional screens. Super cool, super exciting. So, what are we going to learn about today, Joe?
Well, what are you seeing there?
We are seeing seagrass. I'm actually going to take my sunglasses off for today because that makes it much harder to see the screen.
So everyone, this screen right in front of us here, this is showing what we're seeing on your stream here. And you can see that we went ahead and got it connected so that we could see a seagrass bed that looks, I mean, it's one of my favorite things. I actually use this as a background when I take meetings.
Ah, nice.
It's the nice, serene seagrass meadow. And we call it a seagrass meadow, just like you would call it on land, right?
Could we frolic through the meadow?
I have been known to do so on snorkel. It takes a little bit of gear, right? Some snorkel, some fins,
yeah.
But you can definitely enjoy a good seagrass meadow. So I guess the first thing that I always think about when we're talking about seagrass, speaking of meadows, you know, is it grass?
Mm.
Is it the same stuff that we think about on lawns? Is it the same that same plant? And interestingly, kind of.
Huh.
It kind of is. So, and that's pretty rare in the water, right? Because you imagine if you took grass off of your lawn and you put it in the salt water.
First, we're going to pretend I have a lawn.
Okay, yeah.
Yep, I'm with you. We're here.
You could be on St. Croix and have a lawn.
Yes, I'm on St. Croix. I have a lawn.
There you go. Right, but we put that grass that we put on the lawn. We put that into the seawater. Doesn't do so well.
No.
Right? We have pretty common knowledge that salt water is not good for seagrass or for grass.
Right.
But we have what we call grasses and other plants that we have on land are what we call, most of them are what we call vascular plants, right? That means that in the same way that we have blood in our veins that kind of delivers nutrients throughout our body and water and things like that, plants have that too. They have special cavities and chambers that bring all sorts of stuff into it through it. But that becomes a real problem when you're surrounded by salt water, which tends to pull moisture out of it, right? So these are actually pretty cool, and I know you guys are seeing it on screen, but we have a couple of live samples here, so I'll show those up to the camera as well, right? So these are plants that have leaves that have these vascular structures. They get nutrients from sunlight, right? Photosynthesis. We talked about that one, I think, at some point. but they live underwater, completely and totally underwater. If we bring these out of the water, these are just small samples. They won't be able to survive, and that's really wild.
Right.
Think about that. So the same stuff that we have on our lawn, similar. It's not exactly the same, but similar stuff grows under the water, totally in saltwater, spends its entire life there, and not only grows but can thrive there. Right. Now we talk a lot about when we've got grass, or just any plants in general, we've got above ground and below ground, right? And they're like mirrors of each other, right? Because you think like a plant grows up like that for sun, and then to food, grows down like that.
Right.
Right? Well, seagrasses have that too, and that's actually one of the most important things that sets it apart from things like algae.
Okay.
So algae is not a vascular plant, right? All it has is what's called a holdfast. Can you think what that does?
I'm gonna go out on a limb here, and maybe it holds fast.
Yeah, exactly. it holds it in place. It keeps it where it needs to be. So seagrasses have so much more than that. They have what's called a root rhizome structure.
Ooh, okay.
And so this is what one of the reasons we wanted to get some of these out, so you can see these, because you wouldn't be able to see it in the water. Right? So we can't actually, there's one that's uprooted right there on the middle of our screen, so you can see some that's uprooted. But normally, you'd have to pull out from underneath. So while we've got our seagrass, underneath is this root rhizome structure that actually grows down into the soil, into the sand, just like lawn
grass.
Just like lawn grass. We're gonna start calling it seagrass and lawn grass.
Okay. Yeah.
So, and so that is become a really interesting point for us, is because it allows. So when we see a meadow of seagrass, we're not just talking about what's growing up above.
Right.
We're talking about stuff that's growing much down below, and that's much more so than when we see a big bed of algae, for example. Right? They're both green. They're both photosynthesizing. They're both kind of pulling in nutrients and things like that and growing. But seagrass is actually growing as much up as it is below. And so the other thing that we'll be talking a lot about today, and what we're seeing a lot of on our screen here, just as we gently, I feel like a rabbit, we're like hopping through the meadow. So a lot of what we'll see today is what's called, is actually an invasive species. It's invaded it invaded the Caribbean in 2002. First made its appearance here in, I believe, 2014.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, in 2014. It's an invasive species called Halophila stipulacea. It's a paddle grass, and actually
I like to call it falafel grass because I'm always hungry.
Because we're always thinking about lunch.
Yeah.
So actually, that's what we're seeing on our screen right now, and you can see why they call it paddle grass, right? Look at that. Look at that. That's right there on the screen.
Oh, we're jumping.
Yeah, we're moving around a little bit. You know, we got a little bit of waves. There's no dull moment when you're in the water, right?
Right.
But take a look really closely here, and you can see that structure, that kind of oval, oblong shape. That's a paddle. That's where it gets its name from. And we have a little bit of that here. That's where our Science Saturday intern, Mason, actually collected some for us. And we can see that paddle shape. I'll hold that up so that you guys can see it in our tiny little screen. But you can see it really well on our screen here, right? So we see a lot of this, and what's really interesting about this grass, originally it was from the Red Sea, made its way to the Mediterranean through the Suez Canal, and traveled across the Mediterranean, which is interesting to say, because it doesn't have legs, doesn't get up and walk, but it spreads really quickly through doing exactly this. It becomes from one seagrass to two.
Right.
And it's really good once it settles down, of kind of setting and establishing
And
itself.
these were collected from floating around.
Right.
So it was just moving. It was on its way somewhere else.
Already walking.
Yeah.
So as it moved through the Mediterranean, we believe through things like boat bilges and potentially like larger ship bilges and things like that, we probably had just a couple little fragments of this, and then in 2002 we saw it appear in the Caribbean. And since then, just slowly working its way up the island chain, hopping along, as we're doing in the seagrass bed now. So once we saw it appear here, what was interesting, actually some scientists here at the University of the Virgin Islands, when it first appeared, began very closely tracking it right here in Brewers Bay. And one of the really big advantages about this university is being able to be here and track it. And so by watching it annually, they actually watched the seagrass really kind of take over and start to dominate here in Brewers Bay. And so there are other species of seagrass, right? That we have our native species of seagrass. And we didn't necessarily see this seagrass causing a huge reduction in that seagrass. So it's not like these guys were bullying anyone out of the way. No, they're nice. So it wasn't necessarily that they were causing any kind of competition or anything like that necessarily. But what we did see is that it started growing everywhere. It started growing in places where seagrass used to grow, but it didn't grow anymore for some reason or another. Say a storm happened and pulled up those roots. We saw it grow in places that we've not seen seagrass grow. In 50 feet of water, 60 feet of water. We've seen Halophilus stipulacea, the paddle grass. I personally have seen it in 115 feet of water.
That was a humble brag that Joe dives to 150 feet of water.
No, 115.
115.
Yeah, should use a better number. 110 feet. I don't think we see it all the way down to 150.
Yeah.
I only dive down there because that's where we have cool things here in the Virgin Islands, like this interesting seagrass. And so what we found is that this seagrass is really good at colonizing new areas. It comes in places where there isn't seagrass. It comes in and it takes that over. And so in a way, while we're calling it invasive, coming in and taking over, and we are seeing effects of that, right? We have fish species and things like sea turtles that maybe aren't used to this seagrass. At the same time, the amount of area of seagrass that we have in the Virgin Islands, it's actually increased a lot, and that can have some benefits, right? We've talked about in other Science Saturdays, the importance of photosynthesis, the importance of what we call blue carbon, where it accepts carbon out of the water and puts it in these seagrass beds.
We've learned carbon sequestering. That has been a vocab word on Science Saturday before.
Oh, yeah.
Talking about seagrass and mangroves.
Right, it's true. Yeah, we've talked about it a lot with mangroves. And not to say that these little guys and the ones you're seeing on screen are necessarily as good blue carbon storage as efficient as things like mangroves or even other seagrasses, but more seagrass area can be better. Is something to think about. So, why don't we? So speaking of showing how expansive this is, why don't we see how expansive this meadow is? So, Mason, would you mind? You can get the camera up and just show us how wide this meadow is. So Mason's going to dive down now. It's going to take a little bit of time, but he's going to dive down there and he's going to show us just how much seagrass is. So let's see here. So we can see our dock piling. Ooh! Probably shaking the camera a little bit while he gets down to grab it. But I mean, what you're seeing down here, I mean, this is everywhere where you're seeing green. This is all
seagrass.
That's all seagrass. From what we've seen, the majority is this invasive. Seagrass, this Halophilus stipulacea.
Okay.
So, wow, quite a lot. Here you see it pretty well in there too.
They're so pretty.
Yeah. Yeah, it's cool because they're not used to the atmospheric pressure and everything. They become more translucent and you can see into them a lot more. Because they have to be much more adapted to less light, right? We talked about that before. Light in the water. So, which is what makes so interesting that down at 100 feet, there's not a lot of light down there. But they're growing. They're there and they're growing. So
interesting.
These are all sorts of questions that students and scientists at the University of the Virgin Islands are pretty consistently working on. Yes, they're growing at 100 feet, but are they growing as well? Are they doing something different? Right? Always questions to ask.
Yeah, that's really important. Oh, I just saw a turtle. It was far away though.
Oh, it was.
Oh, there's another turtle.
Yep. So because we have so much seagrass area here in Brewers Bay, we do tend to have a lot of sea turtles. In fact, this is a very important juvenile sea turtle feeding ground. That is the reason that any of us who are in the boating community, you'll notice that when you come into Brewers Bay, there's a no wake zone. That's because of the sheer number of sea turtles that we have here in Brewers Bay, and that's why we have to keep that speed slow for them.
Yeah, I think in the past 5 seconds I've seen 4 sea turtles.
All over the seagrass, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think they eat this new species of seagrass? Do you think they're picky eaters?
I think that they're kind of picky eaters, but I think that they might get used to it. And I feel like I heard scientists talking about that they will eat it when they don't have another choice, or was that sea urchins?
Sea urchins are another eater of seagrass, so that's another important one. And typically for both, the answer is the scientists are still figuring it out, right?
Right.
These are the questions we have to ask pretty consistently when something comes in. Say, well, do things eat it?
Right.
Does it eat other things? I don't think this eats other things.
No.
But so in terms of sea turtles, right? What we're always interested in seeing what they're doing since they're endangered. We want to protect their habitat. It seems like they're not really interested in this invasive seagrass. That's not to say that they won't eat it or that they can't eat it. It does have nutrients for them, and it doesn't necessarily taste bad.
Okay.
Scientists can actually test how palatable, basically how good it tastes for turtles. We figured that one out, and it's not.
Science is important.
Right.
What tastes better?
Right. That could be the kind of science we do next.
Yes.
Is what tastes good and bad.
Oh, I'm all over it.
Well, anyway, for the sea turtles, they definitely can't eat it, but it seems like they're not interested in it. So if I'm a sea turtle and I'm swimming around and I'm looking for where I want to settle down and eat some seagrass for a while, and I see this Halophilus stipulacea outside of the Red Sea, it doesn't seem like I'm not really going to see that as seagrass. I actually much prefer, and we have a couple of them here. This is what's called Thalassia testunatum, and it's called manatee grass. Right? Yes. And you can see, first of all, they're much bigger pieces.
Right.
So it takes a lot longer for Thalassia testunatum to grow.
Their roots are a lot heftier too.
Yeah, you feel that?
Cool. Yeah, this has weight to it.
Yeah, you gotta really hold on to it there.
Yeah.
So, right, these guys, it takes a long time for these to grow in, which is why you don't necessarily see a lot of it everywhere, but where you do see it, it stays.
Okay.
Right?
So I feel like that's really important for another topic that we have talked about on Science Saturday, related to storm surge, and I bet this holds the sand in place a little bit better than the invasive.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. So let's look at the rhizome structure, the root rhizomes, right? Look at that comparison.
Yeah.
So if you've got a big storm coming, not even a hurricane, just a
Right.
decent storm, what do you think is going to hold better? It holds sand better for sure. Yeah, and you get a large enough bed of Thalassia, it will withstand hurricanes. And that's where some of our strongest beds are. And so we do want to promote this seagrass growth whenever we can, of course, and the turtles tend to prefer it and things like that. Interestingly, though, once the turtles settle down, it sees maybe a little bit of Thalassia in the bed, or it sees some of our other seagrasses, Haloduli reddy.
Howdy doody.
Yeah, that's our turtle grass.
Okay.
And then we have shoal grass, manatee grass. Those are our two little grasses, and this is eel grass because it looks like a flat eel.
Right.
So, our other so it sees some of these other species, it goes to eat those. Once it gets down there and it starts eating, I kind of feel the same way. Like once you're eating on your plate, whatever's on there, you're gonna just kind of grab. So we have seen them ingest this invasive species, and they do ingest it, but they don't really pick it.
Okay, that makes
Right.
sense.
And we see that in different places, right? So that's really what we've seen here. Other places they say that they do eat it. Other places they say they will not touch it.
Interesting.
So turns out sea turtles have personalities just like us. Well,
I believe it.
not like us.
That would be scary.
Sure. So, well, we've seen how expansive this is.
Yeah. Do you think maybe we should go explore a little bit?
Sure. I'll tell you what. Why don't I help out with the cable?
Okay.
And just tell us kind of what you're seeing as we go on the screen here.
Okay.
And
Perfect.
I'll direct our Science Saturday intern out to some other features we've got out here.
Okay. So let's see where we're going.
All right. So if you want to get out to maybe kind of that clearing, I'll help
So
you
right
along.
now we're looking under. We are still right by the dock, and Smush Mason is taking the GoPro out a little bit deeper to see what other seagrasses we have. So this is really fun.
Still seeing that seagrass?
Still seeing the seagrass. Oh yeah. Looks like a nice solid patch.
about your limit. That's as far as we can go.
Oh. Alright.
Can you see the clearing out over there?
Yep, we're just starting to see the clearing.
You want to dive down some, see if you can get closer to it?
Alright, we're gonna dive down, get a closer look at this.
So what are you seeing over there, Kitty?
So, I am seeing seagrass. And I'm going to be honest, I can't really tell what type it is. I think that I'm not quite familiar enough. Woo! Oh, we're going down. Oh, it looks like we've got some of the eel grass.
Really?
I think so.
These are big, long pieces?
Yep, looks like longer pieces. A little bit darker, maybe.
Oh, sure. Intern's coming up for a breath and he's going back down.
All right, that's important. Got to keep breathing. So,
You're good.
Joe was mentioning that we, have a lot of boats in this area. So I think that something that's important to talk about as Smush is snorkeling around and looking at the different seagrass meadows is how important it is as a boater to make sure that you're not anchoring in seagrass. So this is something that can be really damaging to it when you're looking for an anchor spot. You want to make sure that it's sandy. You don't want to be digging up the seagrass. As we've talked a lot about how important it is. So we absolutely want to be taking care of it. Ooh. We're on a wild ride. And now we are looking at the surface.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, it's beautiful.
We're getting the perspective of seagrass.
We are. This is what seagrass sees looking up at us, not anchoring.
See. Oh, I love it.
Yeah. Artistic. Oh, there's intern Smush and a fin.
That's okay. Just go
All
ahead
right,
and take it
so,
out for a little bit.
What else do we want to talk about seagrass? What else is important to know?
About seagrass?
Yeah,
Everything.
everything.
I talk about seagrass all day.
We always want to bring Science Saturday back to climate change. This is one of our long-term themes, and we touched a little bit on the photosynthesis and carbon sequestering. For those who don't remember or who haven't seen one of the Mangrove Science Saturdays, what does that mean? What is that doing?
You're right. So this is definitely a vocab word for sure. Carbon sequestration. Now, when we talk about climate change, right, we talk about one of the most important things we talk about is what we kind of refer to a lot as what's called the greenhouse effect.
Okay.
Essentially, all kinds of human activities, driving your car, generating electricity, even things like how we make our food and things like that, they generate gases that we release into the atmosphere, right? So that's carbon dioxide, that's nitrous oxide, sulfur dioxide, all kinds of gases, right? These are byproducts of everything that we create, right? Well, the more of that that's in the atmosphere, the more it traps heat from the sun, right?
Okay.
We get all of our energy from sunlight. We get all of our heat from sunlight. As that comes in, it can't escape the thicker our atmosphere is with these gases, right? And because of the way that we as humans globally, but in particular kind of where we live and what we're doing, we've seen a real increase in the amount of that gas in the atmosphere. And so when we say carbon sequestration, what that really means is carbon removal from this system.
Okay.
Right? So rather than releasing things into the atmosphere, we can actually pull it out of that and prevent it from going into the atmosphere. A lot of this gas readily dissolves into the ocean, right? It dissolves as CO2 bubbles into the ocean.
Right.
Well, eventually, that'll be released into the atmosphere if it stays just kind of dissolved into the ocean. They kind of tend to swap gas molecules pretty readily. But what requires carbon are these root rhizome structures.
Okay.
So all of this, everything that plants are made up of, and really a lot of what we're made up too, is carbon, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the more carbon that's here, the less there is in the atmosphere.
Okay.
This is essentially what we're talking about as well when we talk about planting trees. One, trees actively, and all plants take in carbon dioxide and they produce oxygen, so they transform them. But that carbon, those carbon atoms, they don't go anywhere. They don't disappear. They stay as a part of the tree. They stay as a part of the plant.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is one way having seagrasses, having plants, can pull carbon, prevent it from going up in the atmosphere and creating a worse greenhouse effect, and keep it. Hold on to it. And on top of that, seagrasses, they have a secondary way that they pull carbon out.
Okay.
Another way that carbon becomes dissolved in our water is through things like sediments, things like runoff, and right? Well, these big old root structures and the above ground biomass, right, slows those sediments down. It captures those sediments and it holds them there.
Okay.
So it does some hold fasting too. But it does more than that too.
Right.
So by holding on to those sediments that contain that carbon, they essentially store them. They create these banks of carbon, and by doing so, that carbon stays right where it is in the sediment instead of going up into the atmosphere.
Okay.
And then it can be used for all kinds of things, right? Anything that's alive needs carbon.
Mm-hmm.
So it creates this organic structure that can be used for other things too.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Very cool.
Yeah, and so that's what we talk about blue carbon or blue carbon budgets. Right? We're talking about, well, how much carbon do we have to spend? Right? How much carbon can be stored? How much carbon is being taken out when these things are released, or when we lose seagrasses? That's what we're talking about there.
Okay.
And that's why, more plants is better. I know we talked a lot about lawns, but there's a lot of ways you can have a lawn that pulls a lot of carbon.
Right, because there is a big difference between seagrass and lawn grass. I don't think that lawn grass is doing very much carbon sequestering.
Definitely not compared to some of the other plants we have on land, right? We unfortunately don't have sea trees.
Right.
We did cover those last Science Saturday, our coral trees, but those aren't doing a lot of direct carbon sequestration. Though
different
corals
trees
are too. They pull carbon out of the water. But yeah, exactly. So if you compare on land plants, certain plants are better at pulling this carbon out than others and storing it. And our land grasses aren't really the most good at it.
Right. So I don't have to feel bad about not having a lawn because my jungle and all the big trees around are doing a lot of that work.
And the second we can get sea trees, we'll start working on it for sure.
That would be cool.
Yeah. Well, is there, maybe we can look around a little bit more.
Yeah.
I know we've been sitting in the serene seagrass surface for a little while. We can look around a little bit more and see if there's anything else.
Yeah, absolutely.
But let me go see what we can arrange.
All right. And the weather has held up beautifully. It's a great day.
You can get out that way.
So right now we are still looking at the beautiful water and everything here in Brewers, and intern Smush is going to take us on one more snorkel around to see what he can see. Woo! Seagrass! Seems to be the theme of the day. So we've got a nice little rock structure with some coral and got some fish on there. And if you
see how the seagrass is growing right up to the rock structure?
Yeah.
So that's something that's interesting with native seagrasses. We previously we would see that there would be what we called a halo around the rock structures. And that would be because of our urchins, all of our herbivores that live on the reef. They venture out from the reef to eat the seagrass and then come back in. But because this isn't as grazed, it grows a lot closer to the reef.
Right, so we're not getting a halo. And actually, I remember seeing that change diving around reefs.
Seeing more seagrass.
Yeah, seeing more seagrass, and the seagrass going right up to the coral reef structures. So that is very interesting.
That's not to say that they don't eat it.
Right.
But they're a little picky. And we have a lot of scientists who are working on what eats this Halophila. a number of students right now, actually.
All right. So if you want to learn more about the research behind seagrass, you can keep an eye on the University of the Virgin Islands. I know that they have quite a few research pages. You can look on VIEPSCOR, VIEPSCOR.org, or the university's website to see some of the professors' pages and lots of really fun stuff. Really cool research. Very pretty.
Yeah, you seen the rock?
Yep. Yeah, very cool.
See anything interesting on the rock? We're always looking for more things.
Always looking. Looks like we got fish. Got some movement.
Oh, yeah.
Bubbles.
Let's see if we can dive down on the rock. You want to dive down on?
Ooh, some diadema.
Some diadema?
Yeah.
We were just talking about them.
Yep, so those are the long spine urchins. Very cool.
They're some of our most important grazers. Not just of seagrass, of algae.
Right.
They are some of our biggest eaters.
So that's definitely going to be one of our Science Saturdays. We're working on it. All right. Very cool. Got any sea turtles nearby? I don't see anybody. They must be on the other side right now, swimming back and forth. All right, very cool. Well, before we close up, what are our last thoughts for the day?
I used to have. I have a really good friend who studied seagrass for most of his scientific researching career. He used to say, seagrass or pass. And it was his way of saying that seagrasses are really important. And they're a part of everything and everywhere that we are in the water, especially with this new non-native species, but also with our very important native species. So just about everywhere we go and everywhere that we're getting in the water, even wading, we'll probably encounter seagrass. Right. Even more, especially on our south side where we have these kind of more calm and softer sediment, compared to our north side where we have a little bit more reefy and hard bottom.
Right.
But we will see seagrass everywhere, and everyone here in the Virgin Islands, I know, has seen it, has felt it, right? It's such a part of our experience in the water. So, and it's pretty cool of what it's doing for us with the blue carbon and everything.
Yeah. So I guess my final thoughts for the day, I'm gonna, mirror that a little bit. Seagrass is so important when you're out boating, if you're out swimming, if you're out wading, snorkeling. Whatever, keep an eye out for the seagrass. Maybe say thank you. It's doing a great job for us. And we want to protect it. So don't throw your anchors down. And we're done.
All right. Now Kitty and I are going to see if we like the seagrass as much as the sea turtles, I think.
Let's see. Which one do we like better?
Probably.
Should I do it?
We'll have to find out next time. All right. Maybe.
Still smiling. I don't know if we're disconnected or not.
Live video's ended.
Okay. Why did we end?
I ended it.
Oh, I thought that it broke.
Oh, no, it did not.
Oh, okay.